Okay, so let's start then the webinar. So I will reintroduce myself. So Eric Fine from UIR, the technical director, and we are pleased to organize this webinar in the context of the ReMuNet project. I will come back to that in more details in my slides. So first of all, to all of you, so that this session will be recorded. There was a lot of people requesting to have then a recording of the session that we can then put on our YouTube channel. This will be done after the meetings. So today's webinar, we are focusing on intermodal statistics. So I will do some introduction. We have also organized a small polling with some basic questions. And we have here the pleasure to have also Mr. Rubanis from Eurostat. He's the head of transport unit, and he will explain the situation at the European level and what kind of statistics are collected. And the main topic or the main issue of our webinar is the outputs of the studies that we have performed in the context of the ReMuNet project. And we have here two persons, so Vivian and Paul, that have worked, I think, on these 3 points, and they will then share with you our experience and our recommendation regarding intermodal statistics. And as usual, as a webinar, we have a Q&A session after the presentation, and I will close the session with some wrap-up and conclusion of the webinar. We have opened the chat and the Q&A, so you are free to use them. So there will be my colleague, so Remy will be then in charge of handling all these questions. So don't hesitate, of course, during the different presentation, I think, to intervene. And we will have the pleasure or to respond after the seminar or during the webinar, depending on the timing. Okay. So first of all, UIR, in a nutshell, we are the voice of intermodal freight in Europe. So we represent, you see this in the middle, the combined transport operators and the terminal operators. So the combined transport operators offering services either terminal to terminal or door to door, depending on their business models. And the terminal operators are those offering the transshipment services throughout Europe. UIR represents roughly 50-60% of the European market. In terms of terminals, we are representing now so far 200 terminals. And you see here about our galaxy, so the partners and also the governmental bodies with whom we are in contact. And one of the entities is, of course, Eurostat for the statistics. Yeah. To name some figures of UIR, so that's 10 million TEUs. We are organizing 160 trains per year on 240 country relation. In terms of ton kilometer, is 88 billion ton kilometer. I said 150 or 200 terminals that are on the umbrella of UIR, handling more than 7 million loading units. And also, as UIR, we are owners of long-term leasing of 12,000 intermodal wagons. ReMuNet, to make it short, we are speaking about resilience. We are speaking about disruption events. So that's how could we organize better, I think, the supply chain in case of disruption events. We have some issues not on the rail, but also in other transport modes. The catastrophe or the different, I think, dramatic events that we have for the moment in Spain, for example, has a lot of consequence on supply chain. And ReMuNet is one, or would propose, I think, some of the solution how to better, I think, organize the supply chain in case of such disruptive events. So that's, in a nutshell, I think, the vision of the project. This has been split in different work packages. We, as UIR, we have been part of the work package 1 mainly. So that's the understanding of the intermodal world, the intermodal sector. This is why in this context we had to conduct these two studies with SGKV and KMPP about what we call a country sheet. So that will be also explained by the consultant, and also then a detailed analysis on the current statistical methods used by at the Eurostat level, but also at the member states level, and also at the level of the industries. And then for the pilots, it's very important, I think, that we had to focus on two European corridors. The pilot one is on the North Sea Baltic corridor, and on the second pilot is on the Rhine Danube. So that the entire platform that we have to develop within ReMuNet will be demonstrated on those two pilots, and that was exactly the same purpose or the same target that we use for our different studies. The need for intermodal statistics. I put just one example why we need intermodal statistics. I can only suggest or recommend to read the special report of the European Court of Auditors on intermodal freight transport, and there is a clear, I think, paragraph or sections on the statistics. And I extracted only two elements from this report. So first, that's the message for everyone, that the Commission needs to monitor the development of intermodal transport, and very clear that the monitoring is hampered by a lack of data on intermodal transport from member states. So that was a clear statement in this report. The second one is an extract also of the report, but linked to different studies that have been performed on combined transport. And here it's very clear that just name here, the very poor quality and depth of data on freight moved by combined transport services, which at present prevents any foresight analysis of existing activity or the opportunities to enhance and expect that activity. So from this report, it's a very clear statement that we need to do something, not only the sector, but also then Commission and the member states. And that was our starting point in the ReMuNet project. I think, how can we better, I think, harmonize maybe, or to come to an harmonization to the intermodal statistics environment. As UIR, we are nearly the only association producing a yearly report on the development of combined transport. So every year we are asking our members to share their data, their volumes, and we publish this in our annual report. And we have also detailed country metrics to explain, I think, the evolution, and also to to inform the entire community on the evolution on the different corridors. That's the starting point of ReMuNet. We have now asked, or we will ask you as a now participant, I think, to provide some feedback on the polling. So that's the polling. I will ask now my colleague Remy, I think, to put in the chat, I think, the link to the survey. So that's very basic questions to the intermodal statistics. I'm just looking. Remy, you put in the link on the chat. You have. Yeah. Okay. Great. So please use the form. You have then some minutes. I think we have then 4 questions, and the result of the polling will be then inserted directly into the presentation of the 2 consultants that will be then done after the presentation of Eurostat. Maybe Paul, you can maybe, or Vivian, you can tell me if you see already some reaction to the polling.
It seems to work fine, thank you. So answers are coming in right now.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for informing me. Yep. Okay, then I will open then the form until 10:15, and then I will ask then Mr. Barnes from Eurostat, I think, to intervene and to make his presentation. Yeah. And so far, Paul, can you tell me how many answers you have already received?
So almost 40 now.
Okay. But Paul, I think you can leave it open. I think the form, and we can let I think the
Yes.
audience. I think.
Sure, we can do that. So we're almost at the 70.
Okay, so half of the participants have then fill in the form. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, then let's continue. I think on the agenda. So we have here the pleasure, I think, to have Mr. Rubanis as the head of transport statistics at the Eurostat level. I think to present, I think, the current state of the art regarding transport statistics. So, Mr. Rubanis, and we are really pleased to have you on board and to listen then to your intervention. Yeah. And you let me know when you want the next slide. Yeah.
Good morning. So I am Nikos Rubanis. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. I am the head of transport statistics in Eurostat. Eurostat is the Directorate General of the European Commission dealing with statistics. We do not collect data directly from companies. We work in a network with national statistical offices. And basically we define together with national statistical authorities methodologies and draft legal acts based on which then countries collect data from companies. Transport statistics in Eurostat are very visible. It is one of the 9 statistical themes of Eurostat. You will find them on our website. We have about 500 data tables, which we update regularly, monthly, quarterly, or annually. And we publish every year about 45 articles, and we do also about 60 releases in the year. We also have dedicated publications, for example, the key figures in European transport, with data that cover also other domains, economic statistics, social, energy and environment, and so on. And we also contribute with our data to other Eurostat flagship publications, such as the European the Regional Yearbook. You will find transport statistics in one of the 9 themes of the online database. The data are free of charge, and what we collect, we do publish. Under this icon, you can click and on the plus and see what is available. Next slide, please. As mentioned, we collect, our main work is to collect data based on these 5 legal acts. The legal acts are by mode of transport. There is one regulation collecting or requiring countries to submit statistics on rail transport, another one on maritime transport, inland waterways, road, and aviation. We collect data on passengers, but also on goods. The information is quite detailed, so it covers goods by type of good, by means of transport, and there are a lot of variables, detailed variables, even regional variables in each data collection. Next slide, please. Besides the legally collected statistics, we also collect statistics based on gentleman's agreement, and that is regional transport statistics at NUTS 2 and NUTS 3 level. We have a common questionnaire with the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, and the International Transport Forum. It is a questionnaire on inland transport. It is a questionnaire of about 1,000 variables. And we also publish statistics on accidents by mode, which do not originate from the European statistical system, so the national statistical offices. They are sent to Eurostat by EU agencies that collect the data and they send them to us. For example, the Maritime Safety Agency or the Aviation Safety Agency. With the data we collect, we make indicators. Each data set has a different methodology, which we then need to harmonize and put together to have comparable data by mode on passengers and goods, for making modal split indicators, such as the one you can see in the next slide. And this covers the container transport. You can see the share of ton kilometers transported by rail, by short sea shipping, inland waterway transport, and road transport, which is based on data that are submitted under these 5 legal acts. Next slide, please. I have to say that our intermodal statistics, they are not very good. We tried, however, to improve them without a sustainable success. The regulated statistics do not provide the level of detail that is needed to have a very complete picture and measure intermodal transport. So already 10 years ago, we set up a task force of experts and statisticians from EU countries, and we agreed on a common methodology for collecting intermodal transport statistics that was based on the approach used in Germany. And that approach was the less burdensome support method that was discussed in this meeting. After developing and agreeing on a common method, we gave grants. So we supported the data collection in several countries who agreed to participate to our, let's say, action. And we collected some intermodal transport statistics using this common approach. However, just a few years later, many countries reported difficulties in collecting the required data, including confidentiality issues, high burden, insufficient regional granularity of national surveys, and other reasons, and no longer applied for support from us to do this survey. In 2023, so last year, we asked member states where they are with their national intermodal transport statistics, and indeed we learned that several countries, I think about 15 out of the 27 EU countries, they do collect and publish intermodal transport statistics, but they're mainly national statistics, which is of very little use to us. And there is also uncertainty on whether they are still using the common method developed or they have other methods. So we continued in 2022. We continued supporting countries that actually wanted to find different options for collecting intermodal transport statistics, and Statistics Netherlands launched an innovative project on tracing the destination of containers arriving in ports using existing administrative data. In other words, I think you can understand that our main preoccupation is the burden to enterprises. We do not want to actually impose by law surveys which they require a lot of time and reporting because we already have some data and then we just want to keep the burden low. Now, next slide, please. Now, one good example where we have, I believe, good data and more importantly, a means of collecting good data is the European Road Freight Survey. So one of the regulations I mentioned earlier requires that member states carry out a survey of road freight transport. It is a sample survey of trucks registered in the EU, Norway, and Switzerland. And we receive quarterly microdata 5 months after the end of each quarter. We are now just finishing the second quarter, collecting data on the second quarter of this year. The data are by vehicle, by journey, and by type of goods. So loading, we receive data on loading and unloading by vehicle and by journey and by type of goods. The survey covers about 50 variables. Unfortunately, the variable which actually signals intermodal transport is optional. This survey it is a sample survey of trucks above 3.5 tons, and there are approximately 800,000 trucks per year, which they provide microdata on their movements, on their transport activities to us. In fact, to the national statistical offices, which send the microdata to us for cars, for trucks registered in each country. Now, we aggregate the national microdata, and we give back to each country information on all road freight transport operations in their national territory, including those of trucks registered in other member states. I mention it's a good practice because in this way, countries do not have to do surveys of foreign trucks in their country. They are reported to us by the country of registration, and we give the data to the country where the transport actually took place. So next slide, please. So if you want to visualize a little bit what we actually do with this survey, so we have records per country and per quarter from this sample survey with grossing factors, which they allow us to calculate the total population on the movements of vehicles. And on vehicles, we have several parameters on the characteristics of vehicles. And then for each vehicle, we receive the records on all its journeys. And then for each journey, we have also information on the type of goods. And this allows us also to have fairly good detail on the transport of movement, on the transport of goods by road. So that is a good example. I could also mention maybe an example where we do not have good data. It's the railways, because we collect data mainly at national level and regional level only every 5 years. And the data actually, they're not very, let's say, detailed to give us the information and be able to link between the transport of goods. Next slide, please. I have to mention that we actually experience changing expectations from transport statistics, and while transport is something that we follow traditionally and we have good experience on how to cover it, I think there is more and more requests to collect and have statistics on mobility. So I think that I mentioned the European statistical system. We basically produce information from surveys of companies and individuals. We monitor the movement of persons and goods by mode of transport across the EU and national and EU level. The system was mainly set up to evaluate the market opening, so how easy it is to move goods and people between EU member states, removing barriers and creating one single market. Unfortunately or fortunately now, we are asked to produce much more detail. We want to have data on individual movements of goods and passengers. We want also to have the purpose of movement, why people are moving. We also want to have the more precise location, for example, if it is in an urban area or let's say a far more detailed NUTS or regional level. Even we are asked also to produce statistics on active mobility, for example, cycling and other micro-mobility. We want to trace the movement of goods and persons across changing means of transport. And this is also one weakness that we have, that our system is mainly structured by mode. So it is difficult to trace the same goods moving across different modes. Very often we are asked to produce very timely data because there is also a lot of information on mobility and transport in real time, which indeed is a very good opportunity for us to explore, to improve timeliness of our statistics. So one way that we see improvement in statistics, including on intermodal transport, without increasing burden for respondents, because this is a red line, is to use better and find and try to explore the use of alternative innovative sources of data and alternative in terms of let's say, in contrast to traditional surveys of companies. So explore data which are made available anyway, and we could use for statistics. And hopefully that is one way of meeting user needs in the future. I think I will stop there, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Well, thank you, Mr. Roumanis, I think, for your detailed, overview on the transport statistics. Innovative alternatives. I would have then a direct question. I think, do you have now a working group, or what kind of exploration are you going to? In which direction are you going? And certainly for intermodal. So, do you have a working group like you had 10 years ago? Because as we were participating to this intermodal working group where we had to find this solution. Unfortunately, we couldn't manage, I think, to go in this direction. So what kind of actions do you organize now in practice, I think, to find this innovative solution?
We do not have a task force on intermodal transport currently. We do have several working groups where we also discuss and present intermodal transport statistics. We have approximately 3 working groups per year, and there are working groups by mode, for example, on maritime, aviation, road transport, rail transport. And one working group which discusses more horizontal transport issues. Now, exploring innovative data, we have already started with what is available, because I believe the biggest difficulty is to have access to innovative and private data. Mm-hmm. We explored the use, for example, of ship positions. Ships, they actually emit data, they emit signals which are captured by the so-called AIS system, so the automatic identification system. And we know where the ships are at any moment of time, and you can visualize them. So we developed algorithms to trace port calls of ships. So we can have statistics on the activity of ports immediately after the end of each quarter. More timely and maybe more interesting data, because otherwise, if you expect the surveys and the declarations of ports and so on, the data would have been made available, let's say, about 1 year later. So that is one source of big data that we have already explored and published such experimental statistics. I think that we can have access, and we're trying to develop methods for trains to identify the statistics that can be made from the instantaneous positions of trains. And there are a lot of other very good ideas, for example, exploring traffic loops on many roads, or for example, mobile operators' data. I have to say that all these big sources, they are sources of data which they give opportunities, but they also have limitations. Often the data, they are not very pertinent to what we're looking for. We cannot find, for example, the type of goods which they are transported. So I think that they are good for timeliness, but the level of detail is not cannot compete with the actual surveys. So that is one limitation.
I see now there are 2 questions in the chat. So in the chat, sorry. So there's one direct question to you. It's how difficult and how long would it take to amend the mentioned legislation if this is the approach to collect more detailed data? You have mentioned on your first slide, I think, the different regulation on the different transport modes. How can we change this regulation? Yeah.
Yes, this regulation requires a proposal from the European Commission. So from us, the proposal we can give a proposal that is then discussed in the Parliament and Council, and the process can take. It depends really on the opposition, on the ideas on what the Parliament might want to include, on what the Council will accept to include. It can take a year or several years, depending on whether there is agreement between the institutions. I have to say also that the current regulations, they create and they produce statistics which are the backbone of European policies. So we do collect already a lot of data, and the survey I mentioned is very burdensome for countries. When we make a proposal for a legislation, it could be that the legislation, for example, will change radically. And we will not be collecting what we are currently collecting, but we are collecting less. So there is always a risk that if we change the regulation, it might come up with something more interesting, but it might come up with less information also comparing to what we have. It becomes an issue of negotiation between the institutions. But I believe that the question of costs and burden to enterprises is something that is the limiting factor. It is not our bad wish will to change it is that we do not want to impose additional costs.
Thanks for your response. So more and more questions are coming into the chat, so we cannot reply everything now. But there's maybe, because you mentioned several times that it's more difficult to get data from rail. Is there any reasons for that? So because you said that the best practice of road is a very good example. Why is this approach not used in rail, or you are using this same approach, but you are not getting the same quality of data for rail? But maybe you can explain what are maybe the bottlenecks or the obstacles in the railway sector.
Well, I think that the regulation requires much more aggregated data, while in road we do collect microdata. So microdata always give you more detail, more flexibility than aggregated data. There are also much less companies operating in rail, which means that often we face confidentiality issues, and even if we collect the data, we cannot do anything with them. And that even covers passengers' statistics. So there are limitations which they are embedded in the statistical regulations, and sometimes are the limiting factors for producing more detailed data on a particular phenomenon. Now, I have to say that the road freight survey, it is mainly the sample and is tuned to collect also operations at national level, which they represent maybe 80% of the total transport. I think that not all the variables have the quality that is needed to produce, for example, EU aggregates. And so that has also to be looked at with a lot of care, because again, it is a matter of cost. If we want to even more detailed road transport statistics, the sample will have to be much bigger, which means that more trucks will have to be reporting and filling in questionnaires, or again, try to explore automatically available data.
Thanks. So there are a lot of questions, but maybe I will address them also after the webinar to you, Mr. Rubanis, because we cannot answer everything today. Is maybe one, because it's an ongoing, I think, activity, because there's a question on definition. So there's for when the common definition of load in all modes. Now load is payload, rail is container and payload. So that's the ongoing, I think, activity. Maybe you can say some words about the modification or revision of the glossary, because that's an important part of your activity. Maybe you can say some words on that. Yeah.
I believe each statistical regulation is somehow adapted to the needs of the specific mode of transport. One has to think also that these regulations are not only to trace the movement of goods and passengers, they also serve to evaluate the adequacy of infrastructure, for example. We have to make sure that we have enough information to be able to evaluate what type of equipment, for example, should be available at ports to unload ships. And we cannot, maybe we do not want to expand, let's say, our definitions to cover every possible type of good in every mode, because this type of good might not be applicable for all modes. So I believe that there is some differentiation in definitions in order to make, let's say, the modal statistics more optimal, have less on each mode, and limit again the scope and the burden. I think that is why there is no common definition of load in all modes. And then at the very end, we work with the tons, and then with distance matrices, we calculate ton kilometers. That is one practical way of approaching this, of creating this common variable and make the comparison between different modes.
Thanks, Eric, Mr. Rubani. So just say to all the person that have put a question to the chat, we will answer them individual then after the webinar. Yeah. Okay, many thanks, Mr. Rubanis. So we will then go now to the next point of the agenda. So we are now coming to the detailed studies that we have performed in the context of the ReMuNet project. Sorry, I'm just here switching also the slides. So we have here two consultants, so Vivin from the German Research Center SGKV, and also then Dr. Paul Hebers, consultant and at the company Knowledge Based Planning. So we had the pleasure, I think, to work with them on the intermodal statistics and on the different points, so methodologies at the Eurostat member states and also association, and they will now report, I think, on the results and on the recommendation that we have made in the context of the ReMuNet project here. So Paul and Vivin, so many thanks for joining today's webinar. I see that you have already shared the screen, so go ahead and many thanks, yeah, Paul and Vivin. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Eric, and special thanks also to Mr. Rubanis for the insightful presentation up front. It sets the stage very well for us, and you will find that we have a lot of synergies from what we have found out in the study and what Mr. Rubanis has already presented. And on the next slide, I would like to shortly give you an overview of our program. We will introduce ourselves and then give you a detailed insight into the regulatory and statistical methodological framework on how statistics on combined transport are collected and disseminated today. And after this detailed insight, we would like to also share how we consolidated some of these statistics into country sheets. And finally, in the section best practice, we would like to highlight some examples where we can take some inspiration on how to organize this aspect of statistical data collection and dissemination. So that is our program for today, and myself, Vivin Kumar Sudhakar, working at HTKV in Berlin, and I have more than 7 years of experience in logistics, and I'm focusing on further developing and strengthening sustainable combined transport by bringing research and practice together. At HTKV, I've been involved in 6 German and European projects since 2019, and I'm looking forward to introduce my organization in the next slide. We are a member-based research association for combined transport. We have about 80 plus members covering the entire spectrum of the CT value chain. Our portfolio includes applied research projects, evaluation of infrastructure proposals for the transport ministries of Germany and Switzerland. And we also try to create neutral platform for our members, but also for other players in combined transport through events, and seek to promote transparency in the market by disseminating information from time to time. And here on the slide, you will already see a snapshot of our membership. And on the left bottom, you see 3 tools. And the first one is an interesting tool which will be live from the beginning of next year, called the Intermodal Academy. It's a web-based learning platform targeted at new employees to combined transport organization or to students. So this will allow both individuals and also trainers to create interactive courses or laboratory exercises where they can really understand the basics of combined transport and get to speed when it comes to their work environment or also for studies. And the second tool I would like to highlight is our intermodal map. This is a map of combined transport terminals from Europe primarily, but slowly we are also expanding the coverage on a global scale. Here you will find both infrastructure and service information about intermodal terminals. And finally, the website Intermodal Info has the terminology and basic aspects of combined transport explained for someone who's new and looking for a modal shift in the freight transport sector. This quick introduction, I would like to hand it over back to my colleague Paul to introduce himself and take over the presentation.
Thank you, Vivian. Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Paul Hebes. I'm glad to be here today, and thank you to UIR to having us here. So, as a geographer and data analyst, I often work at the interface between data and commercial transport and between data and urban development. And in this framework, my project in the transport sector range from structural data and metadata analyses to interactive visualizations, and repeatedly also in the field of combined transport. But now let's move on to the major part of our presentation, the regulations and methodological overview of CT statistics. So most of the content we are presenting today was created as part of two subcontracts for the ReMuNet project, as Eric already told you earlier today. So the intention of UIR within the ReMuNet project was to get a better understanding of the current statistical methodologies and data compilation proposed by authorities and industry associations related to the development of intermodal transport. And therefore, we chose 5 countries. They were selected in regard of several characteristics, and we chose them at least because they were alongside the 2 transport sectors, corridors, sorry, the Rhine-Danube and the North Sea Baltic ones. And they have at least 3 out of 4 relevant transport modes used for combined transport and relatively high share of combined transport and freight transport. So we selected Austria, Germany, Slovakia, Sweden, and the Netherlands, along with Eurostat for our study. And within the study, we were guided by 2 main questions. First, which laws or regulations require the collection of city relevant statistics? And the second answer is, or question, sorry, is, are there any other conventions or agreements beyond that of the European Union, for example, with the OECD? And the answer to the second question was already presented today by Mr. Rubanis. And so, yes, there are a couple of bases besides laws and regulations. But before we have a closer look to the laws and regulations, let's see what you answered to our question. So the first one of the poll was, how many EU laws do you think influence CT statistics? And thank you for taking the time and answering the poll. So we can see here that many of you answered that we have at least 6 to 10 or more than 10 laws that influence combined transport statistics, and 25% of you guys thought that 1 to 5 or even none exists. So let's have a look of what our metadata analysis showed on this question. So I think many of you guys are right, because firstly you can say there is no specific regulation on statistics, as we learned earlier today in the webinar already from Mr. Rubanis. So intermodality is addressed indirectly for the different modes of transport and the corresponding regulation and directives. And our counting resulted in 7 plus X. So on the tree on the left-hand side, you can see the 7 major directives and regulations, which we think are most important for CT statistics when it comes to gathering all the data for combined transport. And there are numerous associated legal bases influencing statistics on intermodal transport. So the X means, for example, the Commission implementing Regulation 2015/1100, establishing the detailed requirements for member states concerning the reporting of data for the rail market monitoring. Then we have different regulations on standardized framework for classifying products, or even for the NASTA, so for statistical classification of economic activities, but also for the framework for the NUTS levels. So all these regulations influence data and how they are collected and processed for intermodal transport. And if we have a look on the member states level, we can see that there are less national laws. Of course, regulations have the impacts on the member states, of course, but we can see that for the 5 countries we surveyed or that we included in our study, that there are on average 2 to 3 relevant legal bases on the country level. And today we brought you an example for Germany. For the countries, the focus was clearly on national laws that implement directives and or create further standards in order to record CT data, be it to enforce, arrange, clarify, or supplement or integrate EU regulations. In Germany, we have 2 major laws that allow and require to collect and process CT data, which is on the left-hand side, the Bundesstatistikgesetz, the Federal Statistics Act, that requires stakeholders to cooperate with the Federal Statistics Office. And this is a very general law, which is not specific for the transport sector. But for this, we have in Germany the Statistics Act, Transport Statistics Act, or the Verkehrsstatistikgesetz, which means that the different stakeholders in the transport sector are obliged to provide information to the statistical bodies. And while there is a specific focus on the different transport sectors, there is, however, CT mentioned explicitly within these sectors. So CT is mentioned there. It's not left out of these legal basis. But again, it's more focused on the different sectors. However, CT is incorporated in this national law. Okay, let's move on to the methodology then. And I hand over to Vivin.
Yes, thank you, Paul, for introducing the perspective from the regulations. Now, looking at the different statistical methodologies, we created a catalog of existing methodologies by following a metadata analysis. Why did we choose metadata analysis? Because it allows us to understand, organize, and manage the data sets in different aspects of its origin, its frequency of collection, the formats being employed, and so on. So what did we study, or who did we study? As Paul mentioned previously, we studied the Eurostat, apart from national statistical offices of the 5 countries. And then we also studied a few industry associations. And these industry associations were collected in 2 dimensions. One is the dimension of European and national aspects, and then the second dimension is on railroad or inland waterway based industry associations. So some examples include the UARR, Inland Navigation Europe, Combinet, Short Sea Promotion Center, and so on. And how did we analyze data or publications from them? We predominantly made desktop research, but we also, in certain cases, wrote to them directly when we didn't find enough information online. Next slide, please. Here, let's see what is your understanding of the methodology employed to collect city statistics. Predominantly, you've replied that sampling has been used, and the rest are full surveys. But on the next slide, it will be interesting to introduce to you based on our analysis of metadata. It's exactly the other way around. So before we get into that, I will also show you this snapshot of the Excel table that we prepared by analyzing the metadata. What we have done is we have put together the metadata into 12 attributes. Some of the attributes are who's providing the data, what is the category of this data provider, what is the mode of transport that they are addressing, what is the unit of measurement for the parameters that they are using, do they have a legal basis, and what is their actuality or spatial resolution, to name a few. Since we had to align to 12 attributes, we have taken an approach where we combine certain parameters from the metadata into common descriptions. And with this tabulated analysis of the metadata, we could also produce some insights. One example here is then directly linking to the poll from the previous slide. You can see that authorities mostly prefer full surveys, but the next preferred option is to use samples. And we have understood that they have used full surveys for sectors like rail, sea, and inland waterways. But when it comes to road, the preference has been to use sampling. And another aspect that I would like to highlight here is on industry associations. You can see that they also prefer full surveys, but the number of observations are not very high. This is because we have understood that most industry associations tend to align themselves with secondary data, either from Eurostat or from national statistical offices, and they do not collect data by themselves, since it's mostly a voluntary exercise. So using such insights from the metadata analysis, we have created then some findings from our study. And on the next slide, I would like to introduce it to them. So our first finding is that also, once again, supporting what Mr. Rubanis mentioned previously, there's no uniform data collection method for CT statistics. So most focus is on individual transport modes, which indeed contain some CT elements, but it's not really focused on CT, so to speak. And it's also important to highlight that there were some exemptions in certain cases where CT was also a part of this collection methodology, but they are only as exceptions as of today. And regarding the unit of measurement, there's a positive note because the use of either ton kilometers or TEU, 20-foot equivalent unit, is very CT affine, so to speak. But on the other hand, not all parameters were published because the organizations felt the data were not adequate, or it was missing certain elements here and there. The third finding is related to the topic we discussed in the previous slide. Full surveys were used predominantly for official statistics for rail, inland waterway, and short sea shipping, and sampling was followed for road transports. In terms of the form of data collection, once again, linking back to the previous presentation, the EU collects data through the national statistical offices, and the statistical offices in turn tend to do surveys or do register extracts, and sometimes also have extrapolation based on samples. And with whom do they do these surveys? They do this with the national logistic players who are increasingly participating in these questionnaires with a digital interface. And our fifth finding is that the legal basis, as it was introduced by Paul, is then the bedrock for both Eurostat and also for the national statistical offices. But on the other hand, when it comes to industry associations, they do not have any legal basis, and they do it mostly out of public interest or the interest of their member companies. And finally, when it comes to temporal aspect of statistics, most data is then published annually, but once again with some exemptions where we have key figures published at a higher frequency. But when we tend to see these annually published data, these are always comprehensive and in certain aspects useful for decision making. And when it comes to spatial resolution, NUTS 0 at the national state level is addressed very well. But when you need more information at a detailed spatial resolution like NUTS 2 or 3, then it is available only for certain transport modes or only for certain types of statistics. This is in short the different findings that we had as a result of our metadata analysis. And on the next slide, based on this finding, we have created some recommendations. And before we go into the recommendations, I would like to add here that neither Paul or myself are legal experts or statisticians. We have created these set of recommendations solely based on our study here for Project ReMuNet and our experience as applied research project managers in combined transport. With that, our first major recommendation is to harmonize the legal framework, because once you harmonize this framework, we will have an improved consistency of data and possibility to compare data between modes of transport. And more significantly, even after harmonization, it is important that we enforce this legal framework uniformly across Europe. Otherwise, we will once again enter into this area of inconsistency, which does not bring any benefits to us. And the second recommendation addresses this aspect that data is today collected only for transport modes in silos and has only certain elements of combined transport. So even though it's not easy to move to a consolidated approach to data collection, our suggestion is that we standardize the method of data collection within these silos so that there's a possibility for data fusion in the end, even though they are collected individually. We also realized that there are some existing mechanisms like the FT working group, where we can try to develop something like a minimum standardized data set. And this can help a long way in enabling data fusion and comparability. Apart from these two key recommendations, we also have a set of additional recommendations. The first one is to standardize the unit of measure. Although it's somehow relatable today, there is always a data processing involved when we want to somehow understand ton kilometers and 20-foot equivalent units. So if we are going to standardize this in future, it would be avoiding one major possibility for errors. And the next one is that in certain cases, I'm sure a lot of you would have come across the situation where we have three good data sets, but we would not be able to put them together because there is a lack of common identifier. So in such cases, it would be helpful to expand the scope of certain or two of these three data sets to include, for example, also this common identifier so that we can then infuse three data sets together and make a more insightful data comparison. And on this aspect, it's also important that we note that we can increase the frequency of data collection, but as also highlighted previously, we have to be mindful of the effort that is required from the data provider perspective. And here we hope the usage of data interfaces in the future can automate this procedure and make it possible. And last but not the least, it's a very interesting suggestion. Sometimes we feel that data is collected, analyzed, and published, but with a lot of time. So what this means is the decision makers find the statistical publication not valid anymore because the source data was very old. So our suggestion here is to improve the timeliness of analyzing and publishing the data once it's been collected at its source. And with this, I hope we were able to provide you some insights into the current landscape of statistical data collection methodologies and also its regulatory framework. And I also hope we were able to sow some seeds of thought on how we can improve it in the future. And I would like to go back to Paul to introduce to you our outputs as country sheets.
Yeah, thank you, Vivian. So this was our major part, number 2 framework. So we have 2 smaller parts to conclude our presentation. So let's shortly talk about the output. Why output? So in the second part, we talked about the legal framework and the methods for collecting CT data. The results of this is data, and that is published, and parts of which we have collected and consolidated as part of another ReMuNet process. And so we want to talk about that in a minute. But first, let's have a look again to what you answered to our third question, which was, is detailed data on intermodal transport important for your work? And as you can see here, most of you said yes. So more than 2/3 of you answered yes, but I don't find everything I need. I think this very well fits to what we heard earlier today. So there's plenty of data. Maybe it's too much distributed, not easy to find. And also you cannot find all data because it simply doesn't exist. And one approach to overcome this situation was to come up with national country sheets. So for ReMuNet, we created what we call these country sheets. And for that, data for more than 100 indicators was collected for 17 countries. All of these countries are bordering to 2 of the 10T corridors, the North Sea Baltic and again Rhine-Danube. And so selected data has been, the data that we found has converted into national country sheets. I show you that in a minute. And these data provide a focused insight into the freight transport market and combined transport in the respective countries. So basically, there were 3 steps we followed. So we analyzed the existing indicators and validated if it's feasible to collect these data for all these countries. Then we collected the data on different sources, and finally we visualized the data. So the outputs of this process were the country sheets. So the country sheets contain 2 pages. They present a selection of indicators and data, so mostly numbers, text, and links to provide, again, insights into the city markets. Not all the data we collected went into these country sheets, which is fine because we focused on the selection regarding the ReMuNet project context. But no worries, all the data we collected was input into an Excel file. So no data is missing. So you have a kind of interactive interface within this Excel file, which most of people usually can use. So no fancy software needed, no web application needed. So you can open this file and use and filter for the data you need for these 17 countries. So it's a pretty user-friendly, and a lot of data, again, is available through this ReMuNet project and through these country sheets and the Excel file. Okay, so far so good. That's it about the output, and we have another 2 slides for you for best practice, and I hand over to Vivian again.
Yes, thank you, Paul. And I would like to take last few minutes to introduce to you some best practice examples, which we think could be helpful for us to improve this whole ecosystem going forward. And on the next slide, we will shortly also view your inputs on what sources do you use when looking for data on intermodal transport. Most of you have referred to Eurostat, which has also been our understanding from the study. It's a benchmark today that we have across Europe, and nevertheless, it's also supplemented, so to speak, from national databases or research studies and publications by industry associations. So I think we are all aligned in different aspects here, and we can together work to improve the system and get common benefit out of it. With that, I would like to, on the next slide, show you some best practice examples. Apart from Eurostat, it's the European Union Agency for Rail on the left side, which is regularly publishing the rail fact sheets. These fact sheets has a lot of statistics on transport, on infrastructure, on organizations involved in the rail sector according to member states and so on. So that's an example from rail sector, which we can use together with the best practice shown by Mr. Rubanis for the road sector. And as SGKV, we also publish yearly statistics called Facts and Figures. And since the last couple of years, we have also created an interactive dashboard on our website where you can see these yearly statistics from 2018 on certain key figures. And on the next slide, I would like to then introduce to you a project that we are currently undertaking in Germany. It's a project to test the feasibility for creating a statistical platform with focus on combined transport. So in the first step, we had identified the different data that's already been published by public and private entities. And once again, here we are not involved in collecting data ourselves, but we would like to use different data that's available on the market and then create or see if we can create a statistical platform for combined transport. And with this basic understanding, we had created a data catalog along with the requirements of the sector. So we work together with different industrial players in the format of workshops, and we have created a data catalog on combined transport. And this catalog can already be accessed on the Mobilitech platform of the German Federal Ministry of Transport. And with this catalog as our reference, we are now evaluating the feasibility to collect data. Once again, with industrial players and also public authorities. And most importantly, we are trying to understand if there is willingness on behalf of these actors to share this data, and if so, how, and if needed, what are the incentives that we need to provide for them to share this data for such a public statistical platform. And our overall goal here in this study is to create a framework for this platform until February next year, and then on the long run, realize such a platform which focuses especially on combined or intermodal transport. With this short introduction to some best practice examples and also the current project KV Stat, we come to the end of the presentation, and on the next slide, we have also our contact information and our organizational information for your future reference. And with this, I would like to thank you for your kind attention and interest to participate in this webinar today. And all of us are now available for any questions that you may have. Thank you once again.
Thanks, Vivin and Paul, for the detailed presentation of the ReMuNet studies. I may say that we are going to publish partial elements of those results. We are part of a European project, so we cannot here publish as we want. And because first the deliverables must be somehow approved by the Commission, so we have to wait, I think, for the approval of the deliverable. So the deliverable that we have produced, I think, regarding the intermodal statistics, as soon as we have a final approval, it should be then very shortly, but coming, it will be, of course, then published. For the country sheets, so the 2 pages certainly will be published, I think, online. For the Excel file and so on, we are just here discussing among the consortium how we are going to explode, I think, this result. And now as UIR, we have to come, I think, with some recommendation to the consortium. That's why we are not yet ready, I think, to share all the potential results of the ReMuNet studies. But definitely, I think the deliverable on the statistical methodologies and so on will be soon available. And I have still to discuss with the coordinator of the project how to proceed. Yeah. So that's to say how we are going to disseminate the slides and everything that you see today, of course, will be shared with you in a separate email. You will receive then all the necessary documentation. Yeah. As Vivian said, so we are now in the Q&A session. So we had a lot of questions, I think, in the beginning. So far, no question at all in the chat. So don't hesitate, I think, to put it. Okay, I can of course ask some question, but as I was involved in the studies, I'm not the right person here to raise questions. Only the polling, that's interesting, of course. Good news for you, Mr. Ruban, as you see that still the data source of Eurostat is the one that is used by most of the people. There's no surprise, and that's why it's so important, I think, to have you on board, and you need, I think, to improve, I think, also the quality of the data. But it's still, I think, a reference, and I will also come back to that because we are also producing a report on combined transport in the next days. Yeah, but Mr. Rumanis, you would like to react here. You are muted for the moment.
I would like to thank you for this very interesting work. We often start new statistical projects and developments with similar feasibility studies. And I do not want to give the impression with my presentation, at least, that for us this chapter is closed. I am really open to rediscuss also the contents of your study and try to find maybe common elements. Maybe the task force in the past arrived to a methodology that was maybe too hard. Maybe 10 years later, we could explore maybe data that are more readily available. I think that I am certain that we need to rediscuss this and bring it back on the table of the national statistical offices and see what are the possibilities, maybe with a simpler approach, maybe on less variables. I think that we should invest a little bit more time together to look at if you already found some common methods and common parameters between these countries that you have studied, maybe to discuss them also with other countries. In fact, in our support and our grants, that was the real limitation, is that we only managed to collect intermodal statistics for very few countries, and that is no good. So we really want to get everybody on board with a more, maybe a different proposal, a more practical proposal, and maybe we could use also some of your results. So I would like to kindly ask you to keep me informed, and maybe we could set a meeting to discuss further your findings. And I think you had an inventory of methods. But did you compare, for example, these methods? Did you find common elements? For example, that information that all these countries could actually collect at the same time? That is something that could be a good starting point for us, because if we are involved, it has to be something that is harmonized across all member states, and they all accept to do it. Otherwise, we will stay with data which are available on platforms by individual companies that are willing to share. We will not know what market share that represents and how they're linked with other modes and so on and so forth. So that is really, I am really open to have further discussion on your findings and see what else we could do to encourage the national authorities to maybe create the administrative data that can be also used for statistics, because that is also the bottom line, is that we need to have administrative information to base our analysis.
So thanks, Mr. Runa, to open the door. That was one of the aim of the study, I think, to see that if there is a kind of harmonization between the member states, so that indeed, I think in the report we have listed, I think, all these metadata that are in common or not. So that will be also available. But okay, you be ensured. I think that we are coming back to you. I think to present then the results. I think in more details. Maybe one question is to you then, Vivian. How far are you going in this German initiative? Because that's an interesting, of course, a point if one member state is willing to go in this direction, because you said that it's a combination of stakeholders, so business operators, and also then the ministries. So there you have a kind of an alignment. So you are defining certain these common data sets into this study, if I understand well the last slide. Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Combined transport by nature is international. So when we say stakeholders, these stakeholders also operate across the borders, and they also represent a good proportion of capacity or market, as an example. And from the authorities' perspective, we have mostly involved statistical offices of Germany at the national level, but also at the state level. And I think we will have to then extrapolate this effort further and involve also European stakeholders if we have to transfer it towards all member states. Our approach here is to create a showcase here based out of Germany to test the feasibility of such a statistical platform for combined transport. But then when we are implementing this in the next step, we will definitely have to do it at the European scale, because only then it will bring value to all stakeholders involved.
So it means if we join SJKV, UIR, and Eurostat, we have already a good, I think, a point to start regarding intermodal, because I can only confirm with our statistic, of course, this cross-border traffic is the most important. It's more than 70% of our traffic, and the network is going even beyond the EU, so it's outside also the European Union. Yeah. Okay, but that's already a good conclusion, I think, and many thanks, I think, Mr. Ruan is to propose, I think, that we can continue, I think, to discuss, I think, this topic here. Still no other questions in the chat, so we have 5 minutes left, I think. So I will close then this session with maybe two points. We have discussed a lot of points, intermodal statistics. I can only invite you, because we have compiled now a lot of data with Eurostat, but also with other, I think, data sources. So we will have a presentation of the joint report on combined transport on the 22nd of November, so between 11 and 12:30. So there will be the opportunity, I think, to go into the details, because today we didn't really provide here really numbers, I think, regarding intermodal. But in this occasion, I think you will find really the numbers, the market share, and the actors, the stakeholders. So there will be a lot of, I think, figures that will be represented, I think, based on the data sources that you have listened to today. So you will soon have an official invitation coming from UIC and UIR. The last one is promotion. that's a campaign. So we have started a campaign called CT4EU. So that's a campaign for promoting combined transport. So to show the benefits of door-to-door combined transport for the European freight logistics. We are speaking about here efficiency. Here we need also here figures, I think, so about energy, climate, infrastructure, safety, and labor. I can just invite you to go on our website. We have also a LinkedIn page where we inform about the latest, I think, developments on intermodal transport. We still believe, I think, that that's one of the that the combined transport is the backbone of the future European logistics, and we have to continue to promote, I think, this activity, and that's why the statistics are so important, I think, to prove, I think, that we are still a growing market, because we hear some also strange voices that it's not anymore the future. No, we can show that still, I think, intermodal transport is a solution for the transport of freight for the European logistics. So I can only thanks for the speakers, so Mr. Rubanis, Paul, and Vivi. So many thanks, I think, for your intervention. And I will also then thank all the people that are still there. So we are still here, 86 people around here, the webinar. So many thanks for your participation. You will get, I think, a separate email to all or to all of you, I think, with the different documents that we have shared today. And as soon, of course, as the deliverables and the other results are available, you will also be informed. And the third, being short, Mr. Urbanis, we are coming back to you, I think, to have then a bilateral, I think, call on more details on what we have discovered. Yeah. So many thanks. Enjoy your day, and see you soon for the next, I think, webinar of UIR. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Okay. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Maybe Paul and Vivian, you can say some minutes.
Certainly.